Hey guys, welcome back to the Corridor Cast. I am ready to talk about AI world governments. I don't know about you,
Jake
but I
put an army helmet on for those of you who are audio only.
I brought my battle helmet, and
You should line it with tinfoil so they can't get into your brain.
well, yeah, I have. Yeah, it's invisible tinfoil. That way they
My
don't
favorite
know.
kind.
Yeah. So, I think we should just start this off, kind of picking up where we left off last time.
Yeah, we're
which
talking
was-
about machine learning.
Yeah, we were having a nice conversation about machine learning. Oh, let me start my watch. Okay.
Right.
We were having a nice conversation about machine learning. Niko was going through the basics of kind of how it works and what makes it different from regular computational power and its ability to sort of learn things on its own and come to conclusions on its own.
Yeah, it just eliminates the need for you as a programmer to have to figure out how do you get a computer to recognize a face. Rather than having to go in and like plug in all the if-thens and addition and subtraction and algebra, you kind of just, the computer will figure it out. You just say, look, at the end of the day, this is what I want, and this is what I'm giving you. So try again 1,000,000 times over and over until you can figure it out.
The skate Santa of AI.
Yeah.
Wow, what a reference.
Yeah.
I mean, you literally quoted him.
Okay. Well, and so where
So
we
that-
really
yes.
left off
Yeah, so go
That was
ahead,
just the
Sam.
beginning.
Yeah.
was we were talking about AI, and I just blurted out there how cool it could be to have an AI government.
And I
Where
believe I've been blurted out. I don't want any communistic computer overlords.
you said that,
Yes.
and then what did you say?
And then I basically reiterated that.
Okay, well, I don't want a communistic computer overlord necessarily, but what I do want is I want a society that is able to actually look at the data that it generates and make like rational decisions based off of it. And I feel like we currently don't really live in that world where we should.
So
Mm-hmm.
let's go. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about. And let's talk about not only that, but also have an honest conversation about the benefits and the burdens of that.
Yeah, and once again, it's not like I'm not going into this with like evidence to necessarily even support that statement, but I see issues that it could solve.
Right.
And that's why I feel like there's an optimistic like viewpoint to take on it.
Issue 1, if you create an AI government, do you complete the final step in bringing on a worldwide computerized organism online, and now the Earth is one singular thinking entity?
Well, it depends on
A sentient planet, if you will?
well, I guess so. I mean, it depends if if governments share the same like machine learning algorithms to dictate choice decisions.
I think it might be a little important to kind of clarify what kind of AI we're kind of talking about. Like the
Yeah.
kind of AI that can run a government is the kind of AI that can run a world. It's like there's not. I mean, there's tons of like perhaps smaller versions of AI, but they all have to be kind of assisted. But once you get to the level of like super intelligence, it's like, you know, Elon Musk is famous for saying it's like opening a genie out of the bottle. You know. Who knows
You
what
only
you'll
get
get.
3 wishes.
You can't wish for more wishes.
Yeah.
It might, if we get to the point where there is like a super intelligence, it might be one of those situations where we don't have a choice. You know, it's like it suddenly has control over everything. Everything's digital. It can hack anything and everything all at once. And so now it just owns us. That's a possibility. I'm not saying I want that. I'm not saying that's likely. I'm just saying that
Well, assuming
with that level of power.
assuming that we don't lose control for better or for worse.
Okay.
Assuming that it's fostered and it's sort of introduced.
So one of the bigger things that, I mean, obviously there's a lot of things wrong with our government, especially right now, but in general, one of the downsides to government is the bureaucratic speed is
Right.
incredibly slow. You know, they have to like go back, have meetings and referendums and all this stuff. And then like eventually stuff gets passed and eventually it goes into law and all this stuff. Whereas like if you can have some sort of informed, intelligent decision-making that can happen that fast and be implemented just as fast, you could have a lot of like good change
Exactly.
in a really rapid amount
and
of time.
I think that bureaucratic speed is, you know, I guess it can act as a safeguard at times for making like rash decisions. And sometimes that speed that it works at does work for certain problems that it's trying to tackle. But at the same time, there's many other problems that we look at, like the whole coronavirus in China. There was apparently someone was running a machine learning algorithm that was tracking a lot of like public transit and flight data. and it detected when the virus actually started, because it was able to see from like how just people's movement in and out of the city like shifted, and it was like it basically flagged it. And things like that, where it's like that would be a really useful tool. And it's not, and I guess it's the difference between having it as like the tool that people can use versus like something that people like rely on to make the decision to act.
When you bring it up like that, I think the reality of this, of an AI government, you know, it's usually things are much, much less interesting and entertaining than they are in fiction. You know, if you look at a lot of businesses, because corporations are kind of just mini governments in a way, with the shareholders voting, and they have their elected representatives and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, corporations serving its own interests and that of its shareholders. So, you know, a lot of businesses are basically algorithm run at this point. You can punch in the numbers like, okay, we have this shipment coming at this time and has this many boxes and it's worth this much. Okay, so I can pay my drivers this much. Fuel needs to cost this much. And a lot of things are just algorithm, and it's just people executing the algorithm. Now, whether the algorithm is an explicit computerized algorithm or just the years and years of experience and spreadsheets that people have done to just know that, like, oh, I need about this many bricks to build that house. Like, you know, I'm using algorithm as a big blanket term here, but a lot of businesses are kind of run where, you know, there's a flow, a formula to things. And that's where, you know, AI is already being used to optimize that and to improve that. And I think in reality, if you look at an AI run government, it's just that now applied to the government. And it, like you said, it eliminates a lot of the inefficiencies that you get with, you know, the government's effectively, in terms of organization, you know, 20, 30 years behind, you know, modern economic, you know, business, you know, institutions in terms of how it's organized and how things are processed. And that's just kind of how it has to move, because it has to serve so many interests that aren't profit-bearing interests.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing you brought up about the efficiency and getting rid of it, because there's two sides to that. And the human side of bureaucratic inefficiency is sometimes considered a net positive, in the sense that, well, you don't want the government reacting and creating reactionary laws to every little thing that comes along. But that's a emotional human side of government. And so having a bureaucracy to protect against that, to sort of allow people to go through ebbs and flows of decision making before real concrete decisions are made, can have its benefits for humans. But when you're talking about the functional inefficiency of government, which there certainly is an offensive amount of, having it solve that, from just everything from shipping to like the way that it's
You have like district layouts instead of gerrymandering. You have
yeah
AI do
well
district
yeah
layouts.
that would be one thing, though. There's arguments for and against gerrymandering.
That's true.
You
You ever hear the arguments for it.
Yeah, well, but everybody likes it. Both parties like it. That's the thing. No one's complaining about gerrymandering. That's but then also the way that like the government distributes funds, and the way that it invests funds, and the way that it deals with the resources of like on the day to day, you know, there could be huge leaps and bounds of efficiency improvements.
Wren, I have a what if.
Okay.
Would it make any of you uncomfortable if Siri asked you questions?
No. So I mean, it wouldn't make me uncomfortable, because I feel like I'm just coming to terms with the inevitable. It's because it's like, you know,
Wren, what was that song you were just listening to? Wren, if you were faced with this paradoxical situation, how would you react? And what if Siri did that for millions of people and eventually built up a consciousness, a finger on the pulse of the public, if you will, a zeitgeist?
I mean, having like smart assistants like Siri or Alexa has already like improved my life. Be able to like automate tasks in my life to make them simpler and quicker and more convenient for myself. The downside is that you have an inherent loss of privacy. You know, Amazon, Apple, whoever, you know, they're capturing that data. They're using it however, it's their data now. And in the future, I feel like we're inevitably heading towards the personal assistant AI, where everyone just has like a fully like realized assistant to help you out on day-to-day life that you can have a conversation with, kind of like the movie Her. you know? I don't know how far away we are from something like that, but like,
Can you imagine making people pay a digital subscription to have a pet, an AI pet,
oh man,
and you have to pay $5 a month to keep it alive?
oh gosh.
Oh, you know that's
But
coming.
like, let's say if every single person can somehow, or rather, with something like that, every person can now be way more productive. And if that can trickle through something like a government agency, who knows what kind of benefits we could have from that.
Well, let me pose another hypothetical then to you, because what you're kind of saying there about the digital assistant. So basically that assistant is, you have the government assistant, which is basically running the government, and it's learning through the operation of, what's happening, what it needs to do. But let's say there's a criminal case, right? There's been a murder. None of you guys know about it, right? It's a murder that happened off somewhere. And, you feed the circumstances into the computer. The computer starts going, okay, here's some what ifs. And then just on your daily life, when you're having your conversation with your AI assistant, it goes, hey, just a what if for you. If somebody were to leave at 6 p.m. and this thing would happen at 6:30 p.m. and they came back at 7 p.m. and they said this, would that seem normal or would that seem weird? And you go, that'd be a little weird. The computer goes, okay. And little do you know, it's having that conversation with
like a million other people
engaging what's right and what's wrong. And you basically secretly weighing the evidence of, say, for example, a criminal case. And then it comes to the conclusion by having had a bunch of what if conversations with a million people at the same time.
Yeah.
And it goes, okay, guilty or not guilty. Would you be okay with that? How would you feel about that? Is that the way to go? Because arguably it's more.
We need to avoid that.
Isn't it arguably more accurate than a jury
I
of your
feel like
peers?
that'd be
Hold on,
way
hold on.
more
Are you
accurate.
making a case that if you can kill someone and get away with it, it's legal?
No. I'm asking if this is kind of like AI driving, AI courtroom, right? AI judge.
Sure.
AI
Well,
judge.
it's just extra data for the the defense or the offense, or not the offense.
No,
but
the computer itself would be doing all of that.
so like
basically.
completely replacing
the court process.
Okay.
Yeah,
Why?
you give it the evidence, and the computer goes, okay.
I feel
I'll
like
think about
everyone's gonna
this.
want to have to maintain a human presence throughout pretty much every facet of
I
operation.
see where you're going with this, and I do. There is certainly that element where the more you implement it, the more you kind of give people like a waiver for critical thinking, in the sense that like you do have, like, you could theoretically make an AI that does what you're talking about today, right now, and have it probably be pretty accurate. But then the question is that when you start relying on it, it's kind of like the court comes, no one's done the research. They're like, what does the AI say? It's like 70% sure. It's like, all right, guilty.
Yeah.
You would leave
No,
it up to
it's
the
like with-
people to determine the verdict. The
Well,
computer
I
just
mean-
says,
But still though, it's like it can, when you have so much assistance, it can make the process lazy
I suppose even
and
though
undependable.
that's true, but I suppose even though Teslas on a per mile basis have a safer driving record than human beings, when the AI is engaged, they still put steering wheels in them.
Well, that's because there's no law to allow them to not be
That's
there
true.
yet.
But I guess that's kind of the point I'm making. Is
And
like,
they're not like there from a technical standpoint yet either. But
because the alternative is just 12 people.
yeah,
It's like, it's not like the alternative is like, oh, an even better system necessarily. Like, right now 12 people is better than any other system that's out there.
Here's the thing. I don't think we can have computers deprive human beings of life, liberty, and property, though.
Ooh.
That's like a fundamental human right that that another human needs to judge you on, not a computer.
but you can use that as assistance, like
Sure.
for research.
Yeah.
Like the attorney comes in, they've done all their research. What if like one of their assets was they had this AI ask a million people this thing, and then they could present that to the court as part of their case.
I agree that could be useful, much in the same way that a lie detector can be useful. It's an amalgamation of data, but again, it's you're undermining a fundamental thing within Western justice, which is guilty until proven innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
And that is a fundamental right that goes deeper than technology, that goes deeper than
Yes.
it goes to the core of your humanity.
I have a feeling like people are going to fight tooth and nail for that right for the foreseeable future. Like the moment an AI is making decisions for the outcome of a person's career or life or whatever, that's
Yeah.
when you start having trouble.
Right, because just to think about it like this, like there's certain inalienable rights that are laid out in the Constitution, but also that exist not because of the Constitution or because of anywhere that they're written down, but simply by being a living organism in the universe. You possess a physical space. You can direct and command a physical space. You can have thoughts and foresee things and then like convince other people or talk to other people about these thoughts and collectively work together. Like human beings are of themselves a force of nature. I mean, we created AI, right?
We are nature.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't lose those things regardless of how much, and this is me speaking personally now, I don't think we won't survive as a species in accomplishing anything if we lose some of these things like that are so fundamental to just being a living organism. Like it has to do with your happiness, it has to do with your value, and if you let an AI sort of like get in the way of that, because most of the time it's right, there's a disconnect now, and you start to lose the essence of our humanity starts to become further and further pulled apart, I think. And it's important to remember that that's like as efficient and as purposeful as it could be. Like we can't let it get in between those things.
Here's a concern of mine. So in theory, one of the great things about an AI is that it's objective, right? It's going to make objective decisions without any sort of external forces applied upon it. The problem with that is that is definitely not the case. Any AI is a direct extension of whoever created that AI.
Right.
And so, democracy, for example, is something that represents the idea of the people. And a lot of, in today's politics, that's not the case. You have special interests involved, corruption, etc. And so, no one feels like their politicians represent them. And that perhaps that's been the case for a long time. It just feels extra the case these days. So my gut reaction is like, bring an AI profile, and then it'll actually represent everyone. It will be able to have that conversation with every person in America or whatever country and, make the correct choice. But again, that AI was programmed by someone. It was probably programmed by Facebook. It was probably programmed by Google.
Right.
Whoever created this super intelligent AI is going to have its own coded special interest. And so that's a concern of mine.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can't, also here's the thing, like the inherent weird thing that we need to ask here, but it needs to be asked in your analysis there of like, well, if you had an AI that was super intelligent, that was perfectly unbiased, and it was able to talk to everyone in America and perfectly align representation and resources and all these other things, that assumes that everybody, from every leader of every section of society to every drug addict and drunkard and thief, has the exact same resource and access to those rights, no matter what. And so there's two questions. Is that a society that we should want to live in? And what does that mean for earning things in life? Do you lose something from that?
I'm confused. What can you explain that again?
Yeah. So like you think of in the analysis, it's like all humans are the same. So let's take all their information and we'll combine all their information and we'll tally it up, and we'll perfectly, according to our unbiased distribution of resources, we will perfectly distribute justice and resources and representation equally amongst every single human being.
We don't have to go into it with that precept.
Well, I'm still confused. But wouldn't that be the point? Is to
that would be the point. That
create a society.
So what I'm saying is that
that recognizes all the problems and different types of people and understands how to try and make that better.
Well, yes, obviously you'd want it to do that, but that would in order. What do you mean by making it better, right? Because
we could boil it down to specific questions or specific tasks, so to speak. So like the whole gerrymandering thing.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, you want districts to, I guess, what is the goal of creating a voting district? Well, technically to have an even distribution of different types of people in a certain area, right?
Well,
because you
gerrymandering circumvents that allows for a more
And it
homogenous
circumvents it.
voting demographic so that more people from certain parties get elected.
Exactly. And it skews votes in a artificial way because of that. So taking that as an example, let's say you use an AI to basically look at district lines and go, all right, the goal is to more evenly represent types of people in here. So it's not over-representing people per square mile or whatever, you know, like whatever density you're looking for.
Yeah.
And so let's say it comes with an outcome, and are you saying that outcome is unfair?
Well, yeah, but I'm saying it could be, because think about it this way. If you take the gerrymandering example, you have a voting district that's all over the place because this is the demographic where, we'll just take us, for example, most of the white males of the age of mid-30s live, right? So it's like you want these people, okay, and this party wants these people to vote, so they select them, and they're like, great, now this group of people has this representation, right? But if you took it and you broke it down into actual like geographical squares, for example, or you broke it down to per capita, so there's exactly 100,000 people in each district, in each voting district, that could necessarily would just create a situation in which everything is just done by majority or like equal distribution no matter what. And what I'm saying is that isn't necessarily good for society. Just equal distribution and like perfect, everyone gets the same, like that's not necessarily a direction that we want to go in, I think, with AI.
Well, and people wouldn't necessarily program an AI to act that way.
Right, but I'm posing the hypothetical. I'm posing a possible burden.
Going down this topic a little more, like there's certainly like a version of this where if it's poorly programmed, you'll get like a district that looks even crazier than something that a human drew because it's trying so hard to create like an even distribution. And now suddenly the district looks like bonkers because it's adding a couple patches of extra people who really shouldn't be in the mix
it's like
for the sake of
that generative design concept of just like we designed a square and the AI designed this fractal.
It looks like a fractal or something like that. And then it's suddenly like, well, now it's an even distribution, but from a community standpoint, a lot of these people don't share the same community. So we're basically nullifying votes.
Right.
No, I know, but that's like worst case scenario. And I feel like no one is looking for that. But when you take like what is a city or like an actual, like the city limits, so to speak, and you work towards trying to find a more balanced distribution that doesn't, basically you're comparing the shape from a surface area standpoint to its distribution. And you're going, all right, we're looking for like geographical, like surface area anomalies that are creating an uneven distribution here. And you're trying to cut those off.
Yeah. I guess the question is underlying that though is the AI or whoever programs it or us as a culture need to determine what unequal distribution means in that sense. And we need to determine it in a lot more senses because this is something that eventually computer machine learning will be able to somehow influence. And so under the example of gerrymandering, like that is the underlying thing is like,
it sounds like you're still a fan of having a little bit of chaos and mischief in a system.
Well, you do need a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want like
a little bit of entropy.
Yeah, because otherwise everything just becomes crystallized, and then everything is there's no mutation of any kind.
What you're saying is an optimal life is in fact to live a slightly suboptimal life. We need to not be fully optimized in order to be.
Well, because you need an inherent amount of natural mutation across all levels of society in order to continue to reform into the next best possible iteration of ourselves.
Yeah, it's like you don't want to watch a movie full of circus performers perfectly flipping for an hour and a half, never messing up. You want some of them to have flaws.
I mean,
know?
you don't watch NASCAR because they never crash.
You know, but that's like storytelling. Yeah, you want a character to have its flaws, so that way there's a goal of something to overcome and a little bit of chaos to create mistakes that people can understand and grow from. Sure.
Here's a
So we'll make an
idea.
AI that fucks shit up. It was like, all right, where are things going? Like, where's life too good?
Yeah.
And then they'll just like
chaos.
they'll just do like, we're just gonna like say that you should drive on the left side of the road now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just
Ren, what's your
for 1
idea?
minute, once a day.
For 1 minute, it's illegal to drive on the right side of the road.
AI invents the purge. All right, sorry.
But yeah, but like say going back to ways that if like
It changes
an agency,
your garbage day randomly. That's chaos.
Tuesday.
That's awful. But like you don't need an AI to do that. Like some schmuck with the control to do that can just be like, it's Tuesday now.
Well, I mean, you need that if you are in your too perfect of a world that Jake fears.
My world's too perfect.
I kind of like disagree with that a little bit. I
I'm
feel
joking.
like
I'm kinda
we're
joking.
going. No, not you. I'm saying with Jake. I feel like we're
tell me,
we're
let's
never going to
explore.
get to perfection, but I think the striving to get there is worth something. I don't know where I was going with that idea. What I was trying to say is, what if we tried to AI, right? It can do things very efficiently on a mass scale.
Yeah.
Assuming we get to like a much more powerful AI than machine learning is right now.
Yeah.
What if it replaced the entire IRS? Because you have all these corporations paying
So it just tells you how much you
$0
pay.
when they owe billions of dollars in taxes.
Get him, Bernie.
And like the IRS is run by people, and they constantly every year have to review every single person's taxes to make sure that they're paying their fair due. An AI can analyze everything and instantly know whether or not the person's cheating, and maybe like suggest the correct amount immediately as in real time as the person's making money. I know there's a lot of things that would have to.
How is that different than what TurboTax is right now?
Well, because that's still being user submitted, Like I'm talking about like an intelligence that actually goes through and is like, okay, this person needs to pay this much to the government without that person.
But it's not necessarily
Doing
user
anything.
submitted because it's part of your job. Like you get a W-2, and so you're like the government already knows how much you make and how much you owe. So
I'm
in
not
a
talking
way-
about
So
like
why
on a
don't they just
personal
send us
level.
the
I'm
bill?
saying
Stop
how.
letting us stop wasting our time.
I've got.
No, I'm saying like, okay, I think everyone agrees that there needs to be some sort of tax reform, right? Like,
Right.
you have billions of dollars from the ultra rich that should be going into taxes that are not. They're going elsewhere, or nowhere at all.
Well, yeah, it's
So
funny 'cause
that is a place where AI could potentially help everyone by correcting that.
Yeah, but what you have to be doing first and foremost though is actually passing a law on where the taxes are coming from because I don't want to get too deep into taxes right now, but for example, the reason why corporations don't pay taxes is because the taxes are paid on the individual level for the people who profit from the corporation. So the money still gets taxed. It doesn't get taxed by the business. It gets taxed when it's actually ending up in somebody's pocket that they then get to use personally. So you'd have to pass an actual law that says like, okay, we're still going to set aside this much money now for taxes from whatever operation or at whatever process. And like that's not necessarily an AI driven thing, though. Maybe what could be AI driven per se is what if it fluctuated every year? What if the AI was constantly analyzing, okay, I need this much resources to do these many tasks. Okay, this is the tax right now. Oh, it changed next.
We're starting
next
a war.
month.
Taxes going up, boys.
I mean, that happens anyway.
Hey, well, let's think about this. Let's think about this for a second, because it's an interesting thing about tax, and I think there is some utility there that could certainly be implemented. But in all of these conversations, we keep the weird thing that we keep going to, and I think this is why this is such a topic that like people are talking about right now, is because it cuts through the core of like some of the other noise that's going on into the world, and it gets to these really fundamental issues. Like in the tax example, you don't fundamentally owe anything to the government. That's like the fundamental underlying philosophy that we have constructed in the United States and in other Western cultures. You as a human being, the government doesn't have its power but for you giving it to it.
The government is your client.
Exactly. And so that's the idea. That's the underlying philosophy of the purpose of government. The purpose of government is to get in the way of human beings from doing certain things. It is inherently intended to be inefficient for the benefit of others. But in that inefficiency, that's what I'm saying. So when you talk about the tax thing, it's like you're now not just talking about like a way to make the tax system more efficient. It also cuts to the core of like, well, is it self-evident that so and so or such and such should be paying more or should be paying less? And it cuts, and that's what I'm saying is it's like, and we saw that in the utility side of the conversation. We're seeing it in the tax side of the conversation.
I think what you're really seeing is, in general, the government is set up, the American government is set up in a way to approach decisions in a way they're trying to be as fair to all the parties involved as possible.
Sure.
Versus other forms of government where, I say it's this, and that's because I say so.
Dictatorship, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously there's a whole range of things in between, on all ends of the spectrum.
Well, let's take a step back here. We're kind of like, the ideas that we've been talking about are ways to basically implement versions of AI into our current working government.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the basis of what we came in here to talk about was like, what if our government was AI? Like, it requires us to literally rethink how government is run.
Well, that's what I'm kind of getting to. So, generally speaking, the purpose of government, at least how it's been structured, is to come to decisions of how things should be run, where resources should go for the common good in ways that businesses can't take care of. And I'm just speaking to the current modern American system. And obviously, there's a million other nuances to this and what I'm just throwing out here. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, we had a hurricane hit Florida, and it's going to cost this much money to fix it. Well, we're going to skim a little bit off of everybody, 10 cents per person in the United States, and boom, Florida's fixed. It's also not that simple. I get it. But those decisions need to happen. And, right now there's a process with a committee, and it goes, through probably some form of Congress. And then
emergency funds,
the executive branch steps in. And if something goes wrong, the judicial branch kind of sorts it out. And you have like your different avenues to deal with your issues with it. And I think the idea with AI is that you eliminate a lot of that. You eliminate a lot of these steps because the idea is that the computer is going to make the best decision for everybody. And I think the reality is that if the AI is programmed well, it does. But for the people that then get shafted in this equation, they no longer have an easy out. They no longer have an option. There's no longer that shot in the dark that maybe your lawyer just happens to be really good, and just maybe the judge is having a good day, and he looks upon you and smiles and says, "You know what? I'll let you
Second
off
chance, kid."
Second chance, kid. Right. And also there's the alternates that happen too, and you have great examples of all the shitty things.
Right,
that
all
come
the
out of that.
human corruption and the awfulness that comes with that. Yeah.
So do you want to give up your shot in the dark, for maximum efficiency?
Perhaps it doesn't have to be that. That's what I'm proposing. Because like we can go straight to like, well, what if the AI government, right? That's a whole different sci-fi conversation. But what I think there's actual real places where you could implement intelligence and have it make improvements without getting in the way of like these fundamental human rights.
Like, what do you think?
Well, like the post office, maybe natural disaster relief, certainly the distribution of energy and the amount of money cost and sold and purchased on that energy.
I think AI is already playing a role in the distribution of energy.
Yeah, probably. I don't know enough about that side of investment. But I mean, those are just like three off the top of my head that I think could probably be significantly improved. Perhaps tax, at least in just checking the balance sheet every year.
Well, I think all of those areas are going to be influenced by AI to some degree or another with an increasing amount over time. So it's like, what time period are we kind of expecting here? Not necessarily like 20 years or 40 years from here, but like the eventuality.
Well, it's
So you guys know, I forget the phrase.
It's our
the convergence point.
Singularity.
The singularity, yes.
It's our responsibility though to roll it out so that we don't overstep or fuck something up.
Well, okay, and again, it's like there's a very real possibility we won't have that option, because it's like when you get down to it, there's going to be probably just like a handful of corporations, probably 3, who all have similar levels of super intelligence AI, and it's going to be a race to see who can actually hit the singularity. And the whole point of the singularity is once you hit it, it's like
You
that's
don't know
game
what lies
over.
beyond.
Yeah, it's like you've
The laws of
created
physics
essentially
break down.
a form of God, not actually, you know what I mean? But like
Well, no, the singularity is technically it's where you can't predict what's going to happen.
exactly. So it's like you know, but in theory that it's so powerful that nothing else compares.
I mean,
So if you have three,
Is this actually, just before we get too deep into this conversation, help me
Okay.
understand.
okay.
Is this theoretically something that's constantly in the distance? Because aren't we at a point where AI are making decisions that we don't know the outcome of yet?
But they're very simple decisions.
Still,
they're very
but
like
isn't-
simple in scope.
But wouldn't that just continue to scale up?
we haven't crossed the threshold where, like, I can predict what next year will be like. I can predict what the next 10 years will be like. And, obviously I'll be wrong about some things, but like, relatively safely speaking, I can predict what things will look like even in 20 years from now. But the idea is that when you cross that singularity, you don't know what the next year is going to look
But
like.
that
You don't-
seems like a constant carrot in it, where
it
it's
is a
like,
little bit.
where it's like, well,
It's a constant carrot until it happens, and then it happens.
And there is a bit of a
that's like the
plotted
big
out
earthquake though in California.
No,
it's like the
that could
invention
be
of the
any
internet.
time in the next 1,000 years. Whereas like
Or
the
the
singularity,
next ever.
it could be anywhere between 2030 and 2050. Like if you were to plot out, like Ray Kurzweil, he has pretty accurately predicted several of the things that have happened over the last 30 years, like to a pretty accurate degree. And you could plot that out into the future.
So that's what I'm
And-
saying. Is there a difference? Is it an actual thing, or is it something that may not ever happen?
Well, I would actually argue there's already been like a bunch of singularities.
Okay,
You
so
mentioned
this
that
is
the atomic
what,
bomb
yeah,
was a
this is what I'm
singularity,
talking about.
right? You can't predict. Literally, the moment the bomb goes off, you're like, I don't know what next year is going to be like. Like the world could be gone. It's like that's a singularity. The internet becoming popular is a singularity. Like you look at how people predicted the world would function before the internet became a thing. In the late 80s, early 90s, and you look at how people predicted the world would function in the late 90s. They're very different pictures of the world. So arguably, any one of these like life-changing, world-changing technologies is a singularity because it disrupts what you can predict. All the companies that are big right now are not companies that you would have predicted would have been big in 1995.
Sure.
Also, to think about like what exactly an AI intelligence can be, it's like think about our own brains, right? I don't know how many billions or trillions of neurons we have firing in our brain, but it's a binary system. You can replicate that with software and hardware,
Right.
and we're nowhere remotely close to that right now. But yet, the rate of progress you can plot it out to however many years in the future we will probably hit that, assuming that we maintain that level of progress.
We did pass the point where the number of connected devices on the planet are equal to the number of neurons in a human brain.
Oh, snap.
Yep.
Whoa. So, like, think about it in that way. At that point, you now have a computer program that is a one-to-one direct clone comparison of the human brain and how it functions. So at that point, it's like, okay, in theory, you can train this AI and it will think the exact same way a human can because it has all the same sort
And
of
this
brain
is the premise
functionality.
of Sync, which is that movie that's on
Yes,
our Corridor
yes.
channel. If you guys have
Um,
never seen Sync, go check it out.
Well, I don't
Well,
doubt.
I mean, kind of, a little
kind
bit.
of.
I don't doubt that we
But-
will get to that point.
Okay, sure, but so and then, okay, but yeah.
So is that that's not super intelligence?
It's
though.
not. It's the step that happens about 3 seconds after that, where it becomes 100,000 times smarter.
But why is that's what I mean? Why is it assumed that all of a sudden that happens 3 seconds after?
Well, okay, so here's a couple.
Where does
here's
that
some facts.
Where does that philosophy come from?
Here's some facts. Okay, so
Yeah.
if you're able to create a general intelligence, okay,
Mhm.
basically, just some comparisons. The brain's neurons max out at about 200 hertz. Okay, so we're talking about speed here,
Mhm.
and this is the important factor. And brain's neurons are at about 200 hertz. Today's microprocessors can run at 2 gigahertz, basically, and that's 10 million times faster
Yeah.
than the speed of our brain. So if we're able to create a thing that is an artificial intelligence, basically, it can make 10 million decisions in the time it takes for us to make one.
With the same kind of creativity, intuition, problem-solving skills that a human brain would have.
Obviously, it's based on the data sets that it's built off of and whatever.
But
But
wouldn't-
like what we're talking about when we're talking about 3 seconds here is we're talking about just like if you have a decision-making device that's able to do things that it wants to do, so to speak,
Mhm.
something that if it's able to do things that it isn't directed to do, but makes a decision to do, it will do many of them very, very, very quickly before we're able, we won't even be able to keep track
And
of how fast
Sure,
it's
yeah,
doing
and the
it.
key idea there is that it'd be self-improving.
I get that.
Yes.
I understand that. But why isn't that happening already?
No.
No.
The way all these machine learning AI things we have going on, they're all directed at specific simple tasks, like Niko was saying, and they are not in the same.
tools.
They're tools basically that we are using. We are, instead of us holding the hammer and striking the nail, we're building a hammer that we say head towards nails. It doesn't say, we're not building hammers that say head towards nails. And once you're done with that nail, just look around, see if there's anything nail like.
Heck, maybe
Maybe
do
just
something else. Become a screwdriver.
Well, of
become a
course.
screwdriver, like maybe, who knows, but make a whole tool set.
But isn't there an inherent like evolution in the course of all this that
Well, I think the thing is, like, right now, AI, we call it AI, artificial intelligence. You get specific. It's not necessarily artificial intelligence. It's deep learning. It's machine learning. There's all these different
all
things.
these different names? Yeah.
It's not actually intelligence. They're just tools. They're literally just tools. It's like I can build an AI that can recognize a person's face. It's literally all it can do is go face.
Right.
It's just a tool,
And you just combine enough of those tools, and eventually they become more than their sum of their parts.
To a degree, yes. It's not just combining them. You need to. There's a hardware structure to this, and a data structure to this, and a learning approach to this, where you can't just it's not necessarily just a combination. But basically, what we're getting at is at a certain point, you do get advanced enough where maybe you can make a general intelligence that can learn anything. It doesn't just learn how to recognize faces; it learns to do literally anything.
But when just rewinding a little bit here on the topic of AI government, what I'm talking about with AI government, I'm not talking about singularity or general intelligence. I'm talking about looking at a lot of the massive data sets that our world is now generating surrounding issues that we're facing, and the inability of people to comprehend them and make decisions on them in a functional way, basically.
Right.
We have lots of easy ones you can pick out. You can talk about climate change. You could talk about abortion. You could talk about education resources.
Crime rates.
You can talk about crime rates. We're talking about all these things that are very specific, directed tasks that we're not talking about making a dystopian like slave universe. We're talking about looking at these data sets and being able to make like just good decisions based off of them without a lot of the, it's
Human baggage that comes with that.
Exactly. And so
Like, imagine being able to look at your city and be like, oh, it predicted that in 5 years, this neighborhood right here, the cost of housing is going to double. Okay, so now we can take some actions now to prevent that from happening. Like, arguably, that is what AI and government's going to be for the next 30 years.
yeah,
It's gonna be that stuff.
even just simply that, just like there's tools that people have right now, which are just like, all right, we're going to try and predict wildfires here.
Mhm.
So I want to just study some like the movement of people in the area. I want to follow some weather patterns,
Right.
both long-term, short-term,
The rate of smoking.
the rate of smoke, whatever, all of this stuff to help accurately detect where the wildfires will happen next. And that way people then can use that data and actually do something about it rather than just sit on it and say, hey, I'm sounding an alarm.
Right.
Alarm's going off. No one's listening. Okay, well, let it all burn.
That makes sense.
And this is functionally really what I'm talking about when I raise this topic.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about like psychic overlord with a hood behind a curtain that you just like type in like your name and your favorite food, and then it like goes like, you will be a mason for the rest of your life. I'm not. That's not.
No, and
what I'm discussing about.
I think that's. I see that as all net positives.
Board the train to Sector 4.
Those tools would be
Your
useful.
weekly allowance.
Your
$10.
weekly allowance is 128 shekels.
What I'm trying to understand is like there's a lot of like Wren, you had mentioned earlier in the conversation, you were like, well, it's all just inevitable. And so what I'm trying to get at is there a realistic analysis that we can make of like perhaps what these intelligence tools can do versus all of a sudden passing this unknown tipping point where all of a sudden it is this dystopian, you will be to Sector 4. You will be a mason
Board
in Sector 4.
The train for Sector 4 is leaving in 5 minutes.
Is there any actual like
I could take a shot at
analysis
answering
of
your
that?
Well, when I
or-
say stuff's inevitable, there are a lot of assumptions going into that. It's like assuming these things stay true as they are right now.
so they're not. So it's not inevitable.
Of course not.
Okay.
I just feel it is.
But it's just I feel like every time I go on Reddit, that's like what I see.
Well, it's inevitable given that things continue in the current direction. Do we continue to have the economic resources to contribute, time and effort towards things like AI development and computer manufacturing? It's like if for some reason that stopped, then, obviously it becomes an impossibility.
I think it's inevitable if we're talking about its
inevitable if
implementation.
things continue on the current track they are. It's like,
Sector 4 Mason
No,
is
no,
inevitable.
no.
AI tools.
I'm talking about like
AI tools.
functional
Yeah,
AI tools
that's
that
a
allow
given.
people to understand.
That's a given.
The greater
I think we're
things-
all in agreement on that.
I was thinking Singularity, where the point where it's like
You're
AI is
thinking-
so advanced we don't know what'll happen.
You're
that doesn't
thinking
necessarily
Sector
mean
4.
no. I'm saying it doesn't mean necessarily Sector 4. It's certainly a possibility.
Sector 4.
Okay. So
Sector 4.
You think Sector 4 is an inevitable possibility?
No.
On the track. An inevitable possibility.
We're talking about
It's
three
a
things.
possible inevitability.
Sector 4 is a possibility of a singularity. AI
Yes.
government and the AI tools that we need to make informed decisions are not related to either of
We're
those
already
You
working
want to
unless,
know what
towards that.
another possibility is?
unless we implement it in the
Paradise.
crime system.
Yeah, paradise is a possibility.
That there's no such thing.
Well,
Don't-
think about it.
don't
What
be
if
convinced.
every single thing
believe
in
the
your
hype.
everything you've ever wanted? Why does this keep falling over? What if everything you've ever wanted in life you can just have?
Can I
You
take
never
this
have
one?
to work for anything. You can just let me finish.
Yeah.
You can always just you want to have like a 10-day trip in the Bahamas for free? Sure. Like literally anything you've ever wanted you can have. Because an AI figured it out for you, like to make it happen. It's like
Not to mention
I'm
the painful
explaining this
experiences
really
that
awfully.
make you appreciate the good ones.
Well,
like
I
literally
know
everything.
I know. I'm just saying.
This drives at the inherent human thing again, though.
Well, we don't need to get into your definition of paradise isn't actually paradise. Like
No,
that's
no,
not
no.
the-
That's not what I'm getting into. What I'm saying is as a human being, I truly believe that fundamentally what makes you feel satisfied and happy and eager to take on what life has to bring towards you is a sense of self-worth that is established through taking on challenges.
I heartily
And
agree.
the AI would acknowledge all of that.
It would
Everything.
acknowledge all of
Every
that?
single.
No, it would.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
would.
but
That's
this
why
is
it's
what
a
I'm
hyper-intelligent
saying.
thing.
This is
Yeah.
what I'm saying. That
though-
second stage of that is the understanding that it's not just handing everything on a platter, but understands that people are people and there's a give and take. And so it's not just going to go the coolest book I've never heard of is not going to show up on my doorstep tomorrow because it's analyzed my reading patterns. It's going to understand that that's really going to take a lot of the fire out of going to a bookstore and stumbling across a book and going, whoa, what the hell is this? I'm really interested. And then you take a look and I'm going to get this. This is sweet.
Yeah.
There's a certain even small trivial challenges, quote unquote, like that lead to a certain satisfaction because then you go to someone's dude, look what I found. I found this.
Right.
This is crazy. I'm going to share it with you now.
Theophrastus Bartholomew.
J. Theophrastus Bartholomew's
Best games
ancient
you can play in your
10
head.
games you can play in your head. I haven't read it yet, but it looks incredible.
But also,
Available on Amazon.
the paradise thing I mentioned isn't I'm not necessarily arguing that that's what I would want either. I'm just saying that's also an inevitable, a possible outcome of the singularity. Is that it just takes control and it gives what it thinks everyone wants. Not necessarily a good thing.
If I could spin this back away from these big futurology discussions, which are great, by the way.
Although wait. Before we do that, one more thing, because the Bahama
on
trip.
my helmet,
the Bahama
dude.
trip is a great example because we can actually contextualize this. Let's say you're I want to spend 10 days in the Bahamas, and I don't want to plan it. I don't want to deal with this. Just get me that ticket and book it for me. The AI doesn't just do that for you, but it probably goes and rearranges your work schedule for the month or two around it to make sure that you are still being a productive person. You're still attending to your responsibilities.
Okay.
It just helps you
Real
sort it
quick,
out
though.
in a way that it helps you allocate your time in an efficient way. So that way, you can enjoy your challenges and you can enjoy your payoff in a more
Right.
streamlined way. That being said, there is the funny version of this where the AI goes, oh wait, humans need this weird tug and pull, push
What
and
if you
pull
change
in
your
their
mind
lives.
about that
Hold on.
cruise?
What? Hold on. I'm not. We're on tangents. there's a push and pull, that humans enjoy. So I could easily imagine there's a way that an AI is eventually just like getting so smart where it's like, look, there's this really easy way to manipulate people to feel like they're being challenged, but they're just basically being vegetables. So we're gonna like basically just go like, look, play this really hard video game for like an hour, okay, and then you get to go to the Bahamas. And you're like, oh, this game sucks, and then like Bahamas.
But what if you?
But it turns out
That's
the game
exactly how it works.
yeah, and then the game would be actually like a training algorithm for the AI itself to get even better.
We're completely glossing over the fact, like you just brought up, humans are incredibly like influenceable. What
Manipulative.
manipulatable.
Manipulated?
Manipulative. Or no,
No.
manipulative
And
and
manipulated.
manipulated.
All right.
Manipulatable.
I just want to spin this back
Easily
here.
manipulated.
So in reality here, guys, no more imagination land and
All right.
the Bahamas trips with the hard video games to make you feel rewarded.
I just can't beat this level.
I guess I'm not going to do
But it feels so good when I'm done.
All right.
we got
I just
5
can't wait to
minutes
be done with this
left,
video
guys.
game and go to the Bahamas. I'm going to savor it so much more because of this. Oh, sorry. Okay, that's a great analogy. But in reality, what it's going to be, mean more efficiency for the government, right? In reality, it's going to be your arrest rates go up, your crime rates go up, not crime rates, your handling of crime gets better, your budget allocation gets better, the decisions get more
Yeah,
accurate,
overall,
et
your
cetera.
crime rates goes down over time.
Yeah, your crime rate goes down. And the question becomes, do we want that kind of efficiency in our government? Do we want the government to be perfect?
If the tools don't get in the way of the fundamental human rights things, then I think that it would serve a good purpose.
I think I would be sad to lose a little bit of that Wild West.
I'm a mischief maker.
Me too.
I love mischief. Sometimes the legality of that mischief is a bit of a gray
Ooh,
area.
you're a real bad boy.
You've got a bad boy.
Put this
I don't know,
boy in
sometimes
jail.
I like the fact that I can just like, I can take that risk and it's worked out so.
I love that sometimes I can just cover my face and go and firebomb a few buildings downtown.
Whoa!
No,
I
that
don't
was
know.
me pretending to be you.
I'm trying
You know
to be
what?
careful with
I
doing
just
that. I don't
really-
want to just imply that I
think
like to break the
No,
law,
I
which
get
is
what
not
you're
the
saying.
case.
I mean, part of life is skirting the law sometimes. You speed a little bit on the road sometimes.
Exactly.
It's like
Also,
you trespass once in a while
You
when
kill
you're
a
riding your
person out in
one-wheels.
the middle of nowhere, and
No
no
one
one saw it,
notices.
but it's still illegal.
well, I'm just saying.
That's what international waters are for, guys.
It's like, for instance, we like to go on one-wheel rides in Griffith Park after the park is closed down. Technically, that is not allowed.
Yeah.
I don't know if illegal is the
So
right
what
word.
would the
but
AI do to it? It would just
It would
basically
turn off our one wheels.
100 just
No,
autonomous drones would fly out of the bunker and come surround us. And
You would be
and-
checking the GPS on your phones and
Yeah,
going, oh,
it's-
people aren't
call
supposed
the
to be
ranger
there.
and
it
let
would
us
send
know.
an automatic call saying there's 3 people trespassing.
Even
Yeah,
if I don't give
it's
it the
like-
rights to check my GPS, which is totally
and
a
then
thing
they'll
you could
put
do.
you on the train car to Sector 4 to the
Yeah.
slave camp.
Like literally the AI, it doesn't even need to look at my GPS. It just knows my habits enough from just the rest of life that I interact with where I can't control that information. Like I can control my phone, but I can't control my friend's phone, or I can't control, a camera that sees my car drive by.
We don't want that, I don't think.
Yeah, but we're
Well,
already getting
that's-
there.
I know.
Yeah.
that's one of those things where we're actually
we're
at
at the
kinda right
point
now.
where we need to ask. This is great. This is because this is ending on a practical note. We're at the point where we need to ask the question of whether, and this is already being asked, but whether companies that are developing these tools, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, whether or not that's no longer something that should be considered like part of private enterprise, as in like it can so substantially affect the rights of the public. Because formerly, before the modern technical era, the technological age, we had like tools in place within the laws to sort of prevent things like this from happening. But we're in this weird gray area where the law hasn't caught up with the tools that the technology companies are developing. And now they're having such a massive effect on individual lives.
We basically have the morphine drip of entertainment going where everybody's like, ugh.
Sure. But the
Through
thing
this
is,
podcast.
it's like, what's the threshold? What's the threshold here? So like one wheeling in Griffith Park when the hours, it's after hours and you're not supposed to be there and you're quote unquote trespassing now.
Rebel boys.
Okay, so you're so very bad boys. So okay, so we're trying to figure out the threshold here. So let's say we are dealing with an AI that basically tries to track crime and figure things out. Is the AI's goal to track all crime? Is it to track specific types of crime? Is it because it's not possible until you have the AI bots that can actually go out and deal with stuff. Until that happens, fringe crime is still going to be totally easy to do and get away with, and no one's going to worry about it, because ultimately human counterparts are going to have to stop you or confront you. Okay, but let's say this AI still is tracking the movements and knows illegal stuff's going on. So how many people now? There's two groups. There's a rival gang of one-wheelers there.
Oh,
Okay, is it
nonsense. We're all friends.
all right? No. Now there's 3. And now there's 4. Now there's people having a picnic after hours. There's a threshold in which there's a point of no return here. Of like, now we are getting to a point where the amount of people coming after hours is basically screwing with the upkeep of the park, because they're not able to keep up with the fact that all these people are basically either breaking in, or the things they're leaving behind, or things that are basically going against why the rules were set up in the first place.
Yeah.
They don't want to have this happening. So you look at, once again, big picture stuff. You do like a climate change thing, whether it's, like whatever direction this is heading in, there's a threshold in which you have to actually start doing something about it, because the rules aren't they're there for a reason.
Yeah, where is it justified to spend your resources on this, because it's costing you more resources than it will spend?
And exactly, and that type of Wild West freedom isn't. An AI is not going to look at that and say, you know what, those random guys just having a scoot around, we need to allocate more resources to stopping them, because they're not causing an issue. And the whole point of this AI discussion is to realize that these AIs aren't there for those fringe issues. And yeah, maybe that stuff comes up here and there, but it happens in real life too. You bump into a park range and you get kicked out. Oh no, fringe issue. It's an exception.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what you're saying, like, it still kind of boils back to, like, it's just a tool. It's there to optimize. Just the question becomes, can you optimize too far where you lose the chaos and the entropy in the Wild West that can lead to good things?
Well, yeah, right. If it optimizes like, hey, yo, park ranger, just go to the park at 9 p.m. for 5 minutes, because you'll probably run into them. You won't waste any time. Just drive by. If you see them, get them. If not, try it again exactly like 7 days from now.
Next time on the podcast.
And 1 hour earlier,
Next
so
time on
it will optimize them.
Next time on the podcast, we discuss the rights of AI and the fringe, and perhaps we'll get more into the discussion of where we're leaving off right here.
AI handcuffs.
AI handcuffs.
What about artificial unintelligence?
What?
That's right. It's secretly smart, but artificially
No, but
dumb.
maybe we should talk about that next time.
Well, see, that's how you make an AI.
Is where
really smart, and then you go like, we're gonna have to dumb this boy down. Boop, 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 boop. And you hit a few buttons, and it's like power level 1. It's like routing train to sector.
Sector 6.
It's like, no!
All right. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you guys in Sector 4,
We'll be with the stonemasons.
where everybody's a mason and gets 124 shekels a day.
Oh gosh. All right. Thanks for watching. Bye.